Hi, everyone. Douglas Stewart McDaniel here, host of Citizen One, Exploring Our Urban Future, an Urban Next original podcast series. I hope you're soaking up the last stretches of summer wherever you are in the world. I'm currently deep in the Périgord Noir region of the Dordogne on a working holiday with my friend and colleague, the inimitable Olivier Prawn. But sometimes it takes hanging out over a firelit dinner and a bottle of local Bergerac Vin de Pays to really understand your friends, their complexity, their influences, and more than anything, their craftsmanship. And yet, here he is, family home, now world building in the real world with us, and returning to the forests and fortresses of his childhood. Because this valley, this living cradle of continuity, is where Olivier joyfully spent the summers of his youth. Long before studios in London and LA and futuristic storyboards and renders, he was a barefoot kid climbing castle walls, jumping into streams, disappearing into caves, and re-emerging with a head full of myth and light. We've been working on set this week here in the Périgord Noir, experimenting with new tools that further blur the line between cinema and simulation. What we're filming sits somewhere between a speculative documentary, a cinematic fever dream, and a love letter to the cities of tomorrow. I can't say too much yet, but let's just say we've been workshopping and testing how to bend narrative space and time without breaking the truth. Because sometimes, to imagine what's ahead, you have to dig beneath what's been forgotten. That's how you unearth a future worth building. And in a place shaped by humans and their ancestors for more than 400,000 years, we're digging into some pretty deep space-time. Sometimes the future isn't invented, it's remembered. In the cave paintings and the rock formations here, layered, shaped by erosion and decay, and then molded into clay and ceramics. This is a story carved in stone and memory of goats, truffles, cheese, and local plum and pear moonshine, family, and yes, craftsmanship. Of what it means to build a future that still remembers how to make fire, not just data. It's whispered through the forest floor and shaped by hands that came long before our own. So sit with me now. The signal's faint, but it's still there, buried deep in the soil. What I've learned this week is that the future isn't always built. Sometimes it's remembered. And now, I'd like to read you a story. This is a Citizen One companion Substack essay titled Unearthing the Future from 400,000 Years of Memory in the Dordogne, recorded here in the Périgord Noir region of France. I hope you enjoy. Some places feel like they've been waiting for you. Others barely tolerate your presence, indifferent to your wonder. I've traveled enough across continents, cultures, and climates to know the difference. I've stood on volcanic cliffs in the Aegean, wandered the souks of North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, traced the edges of fjords and desert plateaus, and walked through cities that practically beg to be admired. But admiration isn't the same as belonging. Most places, no matter how beautiful, remind you at times that you're just passing through. But then there are the rare ones, like here in the Périgord Noir, that refuse to play that game. They don't care if you're ready. They just are. And if you're lucky, they let you feel it. The hum of the earth beneath your feet, the mineral memory in the air, the collapse of centuries into a single breath. The Dordogne Valley caught me off guard in a way I hadn't expected. In some respects, it echoes my once familiar mountains of North Carolina and Tennessee, not in landscape alone, but in something deeper and more atmospheric. The Blue Ridge and Smoky Mountains hold you close with a soft green hush, like an old song you half remember. Their beauty is familiar, almost familial, humid, fragrant, and gently worn. But here in Le Périgord Noir, the feeling turns earthier, older, much older and more elemental, and not just geologically, but civilizationally. This is a land that remembers. Its caves still cradle the ochre-stained breath of Paleolithic hands, and the hills carry the weight of Roman roads, Templar and medieval fortresses, and hamlets both vanished and persistent. Time doesn't layer here. It seeps, settles, and seeps forth again. You can feel it in the chill that clings to the stone walls of a half-collapsed barn in which a wild duck nurses her eggs, in the way the path bends, not for efficiency, but because it always has. The streams smell of limestone and leaf rot, edged with the scent of mushroom caps and waterlogged lichen. Fungi cling to the bases of black oaks, and the sun doesn't pour through the trees as much as filter, dim, precise, like a cathedral's light catching dust motes in midair. Spruce needles mix with smoke from a distant chimney. Every breath reminds you something ancient is still alive here. They call it noir for a reason, not just the color of the soil or the shade of the truffles hidden beneath it, but for the quality of the light itself. The darkness gathers in the understory, where ferns and moss curl low and quiet, and tree trunks rise like stone pillars out of shadow. It's a darkness that feels cultivated, patient. Above, the canopy breaks open in sudden, holy shafts. Sunlight not as warmth, but as revelation. The contrast plays tricks on your sense of depth, as if the forest is folding in on itself, layering time and silence. You walk through it as if trespassing in a forgotten prayer. I'd come to the Dordogne to spend the week with my friend Olivier Pron, artist, world builder, philosopher by accident and craftsman by blood. The fire already lit, the wine already breathing as we settled in to discuss a new project. The timeless family home, built around a medieval bread oven, was perched quietly on land that had been occupied without interruption for 500,000 years, and it was already speaking to me. The hamlet where Olivier's family farm sits consists of about 5 houses, and it isn't marked by signage or ceremony. It's not a destination. It's a slow-breathing fold in the land, tucked just 900 meters from the glittering patience of the Dordogne River. A narrow and crooked paved path winds you into it, though to call it a road is already generous. More like a stone-lined vein leading you to the marrow of something older than memory. The first thing you notice is the minerality, a texture in the air, underfoot, in the bones of the buildings. The soil here resists. Orchards struggle. Fruit trees lean slightly off axis like they've grown wise to disappointment. This is no Eden, but the walnuts thrive. This isn't a place of abundance. It's a place of resilience. The alluvial soils from the Lentinol, a nearby stream that swells and spills into a 100-year-old lake when it rains too hard, remind you that even modest water remembers its path. 5 centuries ago, this stream, one that today barely warrants a name on a map, powered 8 mills. You don't need a cathedral to anchor a civilization. Sometimes a mill is enough. And while most of the world has moved on to stainless steel and silicon chips, the Périgord Noir never quite signed the contract. The rhythms here are distinctly older, rooted in muscle, weather, and inheritance. Goat herders still walk the same limestone trails that their grandfathers did, guiding shaggy-haired chèvres du Massif Central, hardy climbers with amber eyes and a taste for steep, unforgiving terrain. The sheep graze behind iron gates that haven't latched properly in decades, their bells a soft metronome under the canopy. These are not ornamental flocks for tourist brochures. They are meat, milk, and lanolin, stone-footed workers of the land. The pigs, mostly black-skinned and barrel-bodied, root through oak leaves for acorns and black truffles, their diet shaping the marbled fat locals swear you can taste in every cured slice. Cattle, thick-necked and auburn, move slowly through fields bordered by low, dry stone walls. They were bred for this, for hauling, for meat, for enduring long winters without complaint. It isn't just livestock. There are still true butchers here, not charcutiers in white-tiled boutiques, but people who know the anatomy of sustenance by feel. Fishermen who still know the bends of the Dordogne blindfolded, where catfish nest and perch dart under fallen logs. Beekeepers don't speak of honey as product, but as weather, memory, and mercy, thick with walnut blossom or light as acacia, depending on what the hills decided for that season. Even beneath the soil, the past is patient. Old quarries still yield the golden limestone that built half of southwest France. Truffle hunters work with muttering dogs and pigs at dawn, seeking the black diamonds that hide beneath the roots. And though there are computers in homes, satellites overhead, and the occasional drone above a vineyard, none of that alters the fundamental truth. This is a place that never traded its pace for efficiency. It remembers how to feed itself and how to wait. Artists, of course, are here. How could they not be? Places like this demand translation through brush, chisel, lens, loom, and ink. The land hums in a register that begs to be interpreted, and the people who stay long enough start to listen. You'll find sculptors working with local limestone in courtyards overgrown with vine, ceramicists glazing earthy reds in half-ruined barns, blacksmiths coaxing iron into hinges and hooks no machine could ever replicate, woodworkers still plain walnut by hand, and textile artists dye wool with oak bark and lichen. Even the beekeepers, bakers, and foragers move like quiet choreographers, each action part of an unbroken lineage of making. Houses, thick-walled, slate-topped, and soot-stained, weren't built to impress. They were built to endure. One squats in shadow, shutters drawn like eyelids mid-prayer. Another tilts into the afternoon light, its golden stone facade stitched with rusted iron fixtures that predate the camera by at least a century or two. You get the feeling they'll outlast the next 4 generations without asking for that much in return. There's a rhythm here, a humility. The air smells of wood smoke, yes, but also wet stone, boiled chestnuts, and cold iron. And it carries the sound of lives not amplified, a rooster's static crow, a hinge whining its opinion, the deliberate scrape of a chair across tile. Even the ducks eye you sideways as if to say, "You're late." It's the absence of performative noise masquerading as progress that defines this place. It doesn't sell nostalgia. It just seems to function, not as a monument, but as an ancestral memory still in motion. This village isn't frozen in time, it's layered with it. 500 years of architecture stacked atop 400,000 years of human presence, whispering in tongues only the patient can hear. This is where Olivier Prand spent the summers of his youth. Long before he was conjuring worlds for film studios or sketching speculative futures, he was running barefoot through these woods, jumping into streams, climbing crumbling stone walls, and disappearing into caves without telling anyone where he was going. The days stretched wide in that distinctly rural, pre-digital way, built from smoke, mischief, and unstructured time. A Goonies-era childhood, but real. Dirt under the fingernails, nettles in the socks, and an unspoken code. You don't come home until someone calls your name from the window, or until the first bats screech out of a cave. Olivier introduces me to a few of the friends who were part of that season of his life. No need to say much. They know the bends in the river and the bends in each other. There's a tempo to their interaction that hasn't changed. The jokes are quicker, the silences are full, their children are joyful. You get the sense they didn't just grow up in this place, they grew up with it, and it never let them go. Olivier leads me reverently into his late mother's atelier, a quiet space still steeped in the scent of clay and smoke. Here she once fired raku and other ceramics, including a series of figures inspired by the Paleolithic red ochre aurochs of Lascaux and Fond-de-Gaume, creatures she shaped with such precision and soul they seemed to nearly live and breathe. There's something in the linear spike of a horn, the taut energy in a painted flank, that echoes the original artists, anonymous, ancient, yet unmistakably human. Despite daytime highs climbing to 33 degrees in the valley, the woods and streams here carry their own microclimates. cool, shaded, immune to the heat's urgency. The house, built from ancient rock and settled deep into the hillside, holds on to that coolness like a memory. By late at night, even in July, the temperature drops to 10 degrees Celsius, the kind of chill that sharpens the air and makes firelight feel earned even in summer. And this is where we sat on our first firelit evening, trying to describe a future already alive beneath our feet. The conversation didn't begin so much as arrive, slow, unhurried, like mist rolling off the hillside after dusk. We sat by the fire, the stone walls absorbing our silence. Outside, the woods whispered their own language. Inside, something ancient was beginning to speak through us. Olivier stared out the window, eyes tracing the line where forest met sky amidst the poplar trees. "You don't carry a place like this," he said. "It carries you. You feel it in your feet, in your chest. Not from the books, but from the ground." He wasn't romanticizing. This wasn't nostalgia dressed up as insight. The Dordogne is more than a picturesque region of foie gras and castle tourism. It's a cradle of human continuity. 400,000 years of it. Neanderthals, Celts, Romans, Visigoths, Templars. Layer upon layer of story, not archived but embedded. And you feel it. Not in your head, not as information, but viscerally, like memory passed through the soles of your feet. We talked caves first. Of course we did. From the caves here in the Dordogne to those other caves where we had so recently worked, the Nabatean caves of Petra in Jordan and Meden Saleh or Hegra in Saudi Arabia. Here, nearby caves were carved into limestone cliffs just minutes from where we sat. Caves that were home before the word home had architecture. Some of these structures still bore art older than the last ice age. I leaned back, wine in hand, the fire snapping gently behind us. "You know, Olivier," I said, "how much the caves here weirdly remind me of the once inhabited caves of Petra and Alula, remember?" He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing in recognition. "Yeah, Petra especially. Not just the monuments, but the parts they don't show you. The warrens of carved dwellings winding through the side canyons." I sat up a little straighter. Exactly. Everyone gawks at the treasury facade from Indiana Jones and thinks that's the point. But it's those thousands of cave-like homes carved behind and around within the different wadis, the kitchens, the cisterns, the living spaces and goat pens that really floored me. I looked at him. Petra wasn't just a city, it was a cave metropolis. Olivier let the phrase hang in the air and gave me a small shrug. That's one word for it. Petra did have amazing scale, systems, community, not just carved temples, but carved life. I turned, gesturing toward the darkness beyond the window. "So what about here?" I asked. "Did the cave settlements of the Dordogne ever reach a scale anything like Petra?" Olivier didn't answer right away. He leaned forward, hands resting on his knees. People, well, hominids, to be more precise, have been here in the Dordogne for at least 400,000 years. At least. That's the oldest traces we've got. Tools, hearths, occupation layers. He paused, taking a sip from his glass. But if you're talking about something like village structure, hamlets, shared infrastructure, you're probably looking at maybe 12,000 years ago. Who really knows for sure? "So ice age receding," I said, smirking. "Humans staying put for once." "More or less," he laughed. "You start seeing settlement patterns that suggest shared labor, not just survival. Trails linking cave mouths, evidence of livestock, maybe even primitive zoning." So I said, kind of like Neolithic suburbia. Olivier chuckled. "Exactly. Less monumental perhaps, but maybe more intimate than Petra, and designed to endure." But unlike Petra, which was forgotten for millennia, the Dordogne never quite vanished. It's been occupied non-stop. From Paleolithic hearths to Renaissance chateaus, the land kept living, people adapting, surviving, making, and sheltering. These weren't just hominids, Olivier said, waving off my earlier academic hedging. They were early societies. The cave paintings, they're not fantasy or religion, they're documentation. Maybe ritual, maybe not, but definitely a record. He stood up, crossing the room to a low shelf, and pulled out one of his mother's ceramic pieces, a stocky auroch, shoulders and flanks thick and stout, its horns curved like sickles. There was auroch, there was bear, he said, scratched into stone, cartoon-like, so modern it could be in a children's book. My mother was obsessed with those images, he said, turning the figure in his hands before handing it to me gingerly. She recreated aurochs and horned creatures in clay, always trying to get the line right, the movement, the breath. You see the angle of the horns, he added. That's not abstraction, that's memory, embodied memory. We sat with that for a moment, the fire casting long shadows on the walls. One thing about the Dordogne, he added quietly, is that it hasn't sold its soul. I raised an eyebrow. Yes, there are tourists, he said, but no neon signs, no bullshit t-shirt stands, no attempt to paste on medievality. Because it never left, he gestured around the room, pointing to a 16th century medieval armoire, an ancient family piece. He went on, you go to a sound and light show here, it's in a 1,000-year-old fortress. A Renaissance fair here doesn't feel like pageantry, it feels like continuity. You do a Renaissance fair in the US, he said, now that's fantasy. A pause. You do it here, it's context. That landed. It's the difference between a theme and a memory, between culture on display and culture still inhabited. And when they fire real trebuchets across a medieval field over at Chateau Castelnau, you don't think, wow, look at that recreation. You think, oh, right, they built this with math, with proportion, with muscle and metallurgy and golden ratios. And today, we still find ourselves behind the craftsmanship curve. Olivier went on to describe the Compagnons de Devoir, a medieval brotherhood, a national guild of master craftsmen whose methods have barely changed in centuries. You are young, you live communally, he shared. You apprentice under masters across France, moving from city to city, learning your craft the hard way, by doing it. Masons shape arches, carpenters build staircases by hand, blacksmiths forge hinges and locks from raw metal, roofers, tilers, stone cutters, and joiners, each trade passed down with exacting care. After years of work, you produce a masterpiece, a real one, built, not theorized. It's judged by your peers, not for prestige, but for precision. No shortcuts, no spectacle, just deep skill, patience, and pride. When a cathedral needs restoring or a centuries-old beam needs replacing, they still call the Compagnons, because they never stop remembering how to build. They're hired all over the world to restore cathedrals, Olivier said. These guys know proportion better than any AI model ever will. He said he wished someone had told him about them when he was young. He'd have been a blacksmith, perhaps, built with his hands instead of pixels and light. And yet, here's the irony. Digital perfection is making handcraft more valuable than ever. As our conversation continued into the night, we shifted in a strange twist of fate to how artificial intelligence and augmented reality were oddly elevating new material realities. AR sharpens the contrast, makes us hunger for tactile truth. We're moving past mass-produced perfection and into an era where imperfection, perhaps, signals care, time, and soul. Luxury is returning to its roots, he said, not in diamonds, but in story, in texture, in the myth of the maker. He told me about Vincenzo Cotti, an artist whose resin furniture mimics marble so convincingly you're fooled by weight and texture until you tap it. His pieces sell for hundreds of thousands of euros, not because they're heavy, but because they're conceptually anchored. Like the cave paintings, and like Olivier's mother's ceramic aurochs, Cotti's work carries weight in intention, not in mass. You want a table that's just a table? IKEA's got ya. But if you want something that unsettles your perception, that makes you question materiality, that reminds you that illusion is also a craft, then you're back in the domain of the artisan. We sat with that familiar ache, creation without ownership. Olivier, an artist, me, a writer, both of us storytellers by trade, paid to conjure worlds but never named as their keepers. We carved but didn't sign, designed structures that others would furnish. Olivier built whole planets for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I once helped design futures that now appear in glossy smart city brochures. Neither of us own any part of it. It was work for hire. We got paid. The rights belong elsewhere. Like my great-uncle John Allen Maxwell, who painted book covers for John Steinbeck and Aldous Huxley and the original Horatio Hornblower novels, art for legends, but all under contract as a commercial artist, all labor without legacy. But the impulse to create, that isn't something you can assign a copyright to. It's not a career, it's a compulsion. It's not a choice, Olivier added. It's in your bones. In French, we say une compulsion. It's the same word, you have to get it out. Toward the end of the night, we circled back, not to nostalgia, but to purpose, shared purpose, both global and personal, as artists, writers, and thinkers, to what it means to make anything at all in a world increasingly shaped by machines, to not be understood by others, but doing the hard work anyway. Not just stone or shelter, but meaning, shared, built, and durable. Urbanism isn't a word, Olivier added. It's behavior. It's vivre ensemble. It's how people live together, build stuff together. And that's been happening right here for 400,000 years. He nodded toward the hearth. Not just in the tallest buildings or the biggest bridges, but in stories by the fire in the mouth of a cave, in the choices about where to place fire and food and light. It was about the unfinished work, the kind artists and writers still carry, the kind that doesn't scale, doesn't automate, and doesn't vanish every few years. Olivier smiled into his glass. My brother Guillaume reminded me recently of the old motto of Les Compagnons de Devoir, soyez de ceux qui construisent l'avenir. I took in the phrase along with a slug of Bordeaux, translating it slowly through my rusty French. Be among those who build the future, he added, raising his glass. We clinked. Dordogne isn't ancient, it's ongoing. Not a relic, not a memory, but a living reminder that story is still made by hand. Even with new tools, always in the spirit of the cave painters and the mothers who shaped clay and raku with love and fire. The future doesn't wait. It settles into the soil and waits to be unearthed once more. Thanks for listening to Citizen One, Exploring Our Urban Future, an Urban Next original podcast series. This has been a special episode for perhaps a little light or heavy, depending on your point of view, summer reading. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you soon.